It was supposed to be a night of unity, a night of remembrance, a night honoring the legacy of a man who gave his life for justice and peace. Instead, it became something else entirely. And not because of some backstage mishap or red carpet wardrobe malfunction. No, this rupture happened front and center, on a global stage, in front of tens of millions watching live, and even more who would wake up to it replayed on every corner of the internet. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Billie Eilish, Grammy-winning, Gen Z icon, stepped up to the podium at the 2026 MLK Jr. Beloved Community Awards and delivered a speech that, in tone and language, felt unmistakably like a warning shot. Calm, clear, cold, just 4 minutes long. But embedded within it was a statement so sharp it pierced through the carefully orchestrated narrative Meghan Markle had spent the last 6 months trying to rebuild. "We don't need wannabes," Billie said, eyes scanning the audience. "We need warriors." That was it. No names were mentioned, no accusations made. But in that room, in that moment, every glance shot toward the same face. Meghan Markle's. And she knew. So did everyone else. But let's pause there. Let's not leap to the climax before we understand the slow, smoldering build that made this eruption not just possible, but inevitable. Because this story isn't just about one speech, or one look, or one celebrity calling out another. It's about the collision of two very different kinds of power, earned and curated. It's about a stage built to honor the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And how that platform, meant for justice and remembrance, became the setting for what some are calling a cultural reckoning. And maybe, just maybe, it's about more than Billie and Meghan. So here's the question that's been haunting the headlines. Why did Billie do it? Why, at an event centered on peace and community, did one of the most influential artists of her generation seem to publicly shame a fellow guest? And maybe even more importantly, why did it feel like the world collectively nodded in agreement? Now, let me be clear, we're not interested in sound bites. This isn't about standing Billie or slamming Meghan. This is a slow burn expose, a real-time unraveling of everything that led to that now infamous moment, and the fallout still rippling through the worlds of celebrity, activism, and image-making. Because what Billie said, what she didn't say, has meaning, intent, history, and that meaning? It's layered in everything that came before. And let's not pretend this came out of nowhere. Behind the clean headlines and red carpet smiles, there's been a rising undercurrent, a frustration, a quiet eye-roll culture building in the music and entertainment world. Whispers, looks, carefully dodged collaborations. And yes, private shade. There's been a growing sentiment that Meghan Markle, whatever you think of her, has been playing a role too long. That the mask, once seen as survival, now looks like strategy. And that the strategy, well, it's starting to crack. And when that mask cracks, what's left? A woman who's been through public crucifixion, yes. A woman who's made powerful enemies. Who's endured brutal press cycles and cutthroat PR wars. But also, a woman who knows how to control the frame. Or at least, she did. Because Billie Eilish is not the kind of opponent you see coming. She doesn't rant on Instagram. She doesn't do long-winded statements or emotionally curated podcast monologues. She speaks through silence, through visuals, through timing. And when she does speak, the few words she uses cut deeper than paragraphs. So when she said, "We don't need wannabes, we need warriors," it wasn't just a throwaway line. It was a scalpel. And if you're thinking, maybe this is all a coincidence, a media overreaction, a viral moment overblown, I'd urge you to look again. Look at the sequence. Look at the history. Look at what Billie said before and after that line. Look at Meghan's face the moment it landed. She wasn't confused. She wasn't shocked. She was devastated. That reaction wasn't the product of an ambiguous sentence. It was the reaction of someone who recognized a message meant just for her and knew exactly where it came from. But here's the thing that makes this story matter more than just two celebrities clashing. This happened at the MLK Jr. Beloved Community Awards. This wasn't the VMAs. It wasn't a Vanity Fair after-party. It was a night built to honor one of the most powerful legacies of the 20th century, a man who literally gave his life in the service of justice, compassion, and unity. And for Billie to make that statement on that night, she had to believe the moment called for it. So what led to that moment? What happened backstage? What's the real history between Meghan and Billie? And what does it say about the current state of celebrity activism? And who gets to speak for justice in 2026? Because this isn't just drama. This is about performance versus authenticity. This is about image versus impact. This is about a line being drawn, not by tabloids, not by royal watchers, not even by fans, but by another woman at the top of her field, standing up and saying, "Not here. Not tonight. Not like this." And that's where it begins to get complicated. Because for all the public tension and viral replays, the story behind that moment is murkier, more personal, and far less glamorous than either woman would like you to believe. In fact, there's a trail, subtle but traceable, that winds all the way back to 2022. Long before the awards night, long before the speeches, there were quiet moments, almost forgettable. A glance ignored at an after-party, an email leaked by a staffer, a podcast invitation declined, a snide comment in a pitch meeting that no one was supposed to hear. And through it all, one theme emerges again and again. Meghan wanted Billie's credibility. Billie wanted nothing to do with the act. It was a slow simmer, a cold war fought not with headlines, but with silences, with refusals, with absence, until the moment came when Billie decided to say just enough and no more. And it worked, because in that one line, those 8 words, she managed to do what months of tabloid scrutiny and think pieces could not. She exposed the fracture. She said what a lot of people were thinking, but no one dared to say out loud. And she did it with a smile. Now here's where it gets even stranger. As we were researching this story, digging into archives, contacts, even leaked emails, something else emerged. Something no one's talking about yet. There's a piece of this puzzle that hasn't hit headlines. Something that happened just hours before the awards ceremony. Backstage. Off camera. Something said in a private moment. Captured, accidentally, by a hot mic. We'll get to that. But not yet. First, you need to understand the setup. The stage. The power plays that led here. Because this wasn't a random feud. This was an impulsive shade. This was a culmination. And like any culmination, it came with consequences. For Meghan, the fallout was swift. Brand deals hesitated. Followers dropped. Public support splintered. For Billie, the silence continued, but her message had already been received. So what now? What happens when two public figures collide on the most sacred of stages? What happens when authenticity meets artifice and refuses to play along? We'll take you through it, one thread at a time. From the first seed of tension to the unraveling backstage. From curated Instagram apologies to the real, raw words caught on tape. From Meghan's carefully rehearsed rebuttal to the moment she realized it was already too late. Because when a microphone becomes a weapon and a speech becomes a showdown, the echoes don't just die out. They spread. And in this case, the aftershock is still shaking the walls of Hollywood, activism, and royal image-making. So buckle in. Because what happened next, no one saw coming. What exactly did the room feel like, right before it broke? Because before the cameras caught Billie Eilish delivering what would become the line of the night, before Meghan's expression froze in a tight, carefully composed smile, there was a beat. A moment. A stillness so thick, it almost dared someone to cut through it. And Billie did. But what's strange is, it wasn't loud. Not angry. Not even particularly dramatic. No shouting. No raised eyebrows. Just a line dropped so effortlessly, so cleanly, that it almost passed as a compliment, if you weren't listening too closely. But let's rewind, because understanding that moment means understanding the room it happened in. January 15th, 2026. Atlanta, the 15th Annual MLK Jr. Beloved Community Awards. An event that, over the years, has grown from a modest civil rights commemoration to a major cultural summit. Equal parts reverent and glamorous. Think, Black excellence meets global influence. Celebrities shoulder to shoulder with activists, civil rights legends alongside pop icons, all under the same roof. You had politicians flying in from Washington. You had journalists, faith leaders, corporate executives. But you also had Beyoncé, Kendrick, Viola Davis, Michelle Yeoh. The Obamas weren't there in person this year, but their video message opened the evening with a weight only they can bring. And yes, Billie Eilish. Fresh off a year that redefined her career. A multi-genre record that stunned critics. A documentary that reshaped how Gen Z sees vulnerability. and a quietly growing presence in youth-led justice movements. She wasn't the headline act that night, but she didn't need to be. People were watching. And then there was Meghan, in white, standing out in a sea of rich colors, flowing fabrics, African prints, velvet suits, satin gowns. Meghan chose a minimalist ivory silk dress that hugged just enough and shimmered under the lights. Unmistakable. Intentional. She wasn't scheduled to speak until the second hour. But her arrival? That was already the opening act. Photographers didn't miss it. Neither did the guests. Quiet murmurs. Side glances. A few carefully disguised eye rolls. And one audible hum from a woman seated near the front, caught on a hot mic, though no one's quite sure who she was. Meghan swept in like a statement. And maybe that was the point. After a bruising year, Netflix walking away from the $100 million deal, Spotify publicly mocking the Sussex brand, and Archwell's credibility wobbling on the edge of irrelevance. This was the moment. The comeback. The realignment. Meghan was repositioning herself. Again, not as the ex-royal, not as the victim, but as a leader, a speaker, a conscience. Except, she wasn't the only one with something to say. Billie's speech was slotted just before Meghan's. At first, that seemed like a harmless bit of programming. A young artist being recognized for her advocacy, sandwiched between heavier, more politically seasoned segments. But behind the scenes, that order had changed twice. And, according to one production assistant who later spoke anonymously, Meghan's team had quietly lobbied for Billie to go earlier in the night. Ideally, in the first hour. Maybe even before the dinner break. The reasoning? Meghan's message would land better if the emotional tone wasn't complicated by unpredictable youth moments. Those were the actual words used, unpredictable youth moments. And Billie heard about it. No one told her directly, of course. But someone close to the foundation staff let it slip. Casual. Offhand. But Billie remembered. She stayed calm. Said nothing. Just nodded. And on the night of the awards, when she stepped up to the podium just minutes before Meghan, she didn't read from the notes her team had pre-approved with organizers. She went off script. What's chilling is how subtle it was. The first 2 minutes were everything you'd expect. Gratitude. Humility. A moving tribute to Dr. King's legacy. References to community building, justice, art as resistance. But then came the shift. She paused, looked up, let the silence stretch just a little too long. And then, some of us are here because this work chose us. Some of us showed up because we could not show up. Not for clout, not for headlines, not for reinvention, but because it hurt too much to stay quiet. Beat. And now, especially now, we don't need curated pain. We need honest rage. We don't need wannabes. We need warriors. She didn't blink. The air went still. You could feel bodies lock into place. Eyes darting, hands stiffening mid-clap. And Meghan? She smiled. Just for a second. Wide. Tooth showing. The kind of smile that's meant to send a message. I'm fine. This is fine. Nothing is wrong. But her hand, resting on the edge of her seat, it curled. You can see it in the replay. A brief, almost involuntary clench of her fingers into her palm. She knew. Because here's the thing. This line wasn't abstract. It wasn't general. It was scalpel precise. Billie had layered the language to mirror phrases Meghan had used in her own previous speeches. Curated pain. Reinvention. Even the word warrior, which Meghan had used repeatedly in her 2024 speech to the Global Girls Alliance. It wasn't just shade. It was a direct quote flipped against her. And yet, no one could accuse Billie of attacking her. Not on paper. Not in transcript. There were no names. No overt mentions. Just implication. Crafted so carefully that even media outlets had to tiptoe around it. But inside that room, there was no confusion. People understood. The applause was scattered. Hesitant. Then it grew, slowly at first. Billie stepped back from the mic, nodded once, and walked off stage. Meghan was next. And she had a problem. Because her speech hadn't changed. It was still full of hopeful language. Still framed around building bridges, healing divides, using our voices together. But the crowd's emotional center had just shifted. Billie's speech, brief as it was, had introduced a crack in the narrative. And everyone was now watching Meghan, not for inspiration, but for reaction. What would she do? Would she address it? Ignore it? Did she even know? She did. And that's where things started to truly unravel. Not publicly. Not yet. That would come later. But inside Meghan's head, backstage, behind the smile, panic was setting in. Because this wasn't how it was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the comeback story. The redemption arc. The brave, misunderstood woman reclaiming her voice. Instead, she'd just been framed, on one of the most sacred platforms in American cultural memory, as a wannabe. And she had no idea how to respond. Or maybe she did. Because what happened in the next 15 minutes would mark the beginning of her most dramatic and most desperate pivot yet. But before we get there, you need to understand the history between these two women.